I'll tell you a little bit about my journey with Portnoy. So I taught a class a couple months back, and it was a Python and Appium automation course, right? So the way we did the course was like 2 hours in the weekdays. We would do like Tuesday 6 to 8, and then Thursday 6 to 8 p.m. and then on a Saturday we would go a little bit longer, like 2 to 4 or 5, depending on how the pace is there for the class, right? So what we cover in this class is basically you'll learn some basics about Python. You would learn like how to install Appium on your machines. We covered both like Windows as well as Mac machines in the previous class. So Appium has like this desktop or like an desktop application as well. But mainly what we focus in the class is like how in the real work environment, like how would you install Appium using Node.js, and how would you set up your local machine for iOS as well as Android automation. And that would be the first few classes, depending on everyone's exposure to like, Bash or Windows command prompt, like how familiar they are setting like environment variables and things like that. There's a lot of installation, like we would be needing like Xcode, we'd be needing, your Android Studio for Android, right? Installing different emulators for Android, right? So first few classes are that. I would give like an architecture overview about the class, about the Appium and how an Appium driver or like iOS driver interacts with your iOS application versus how Android driver interacts with your Android application, right? So that would be your first few classes, and then we would dive into Python PyTest framework, right? So that's the framework we use to write our test in, right? So we go like slowly, make sure everybody understands what we're covering in the class. Students can ping me after class. We usually have like a Slack channel, that we would go off of. After the class, students can reach directly to me over there. And then we would do basics about PyTest framework, build it slowly, one step at a time, right? We don't go like build a framework and then try to do write the test, but we build basics of the framework. Then we dive into writing our first Android test, running against an emulator and like a test application. And then we go slowly into like our first iOS application test. And from then on, we build upon the framework as well. And from there, we cover like a lot of different features as well, right? And then eventual goal of the class is, where you would have a proper understanding like what a framework would need to run like your iOS, Android automation, and like how would you structure your framework. And then we also use few test applications for both Android and iOS. And then towards the later end of the course, we also cover like how to write just one test, which can run across both Android and iOS applications. Then we also cover, running your test on real devices, right? Initially in the class, we would run most of our tests on emulators or simulators, but towards the end, then we would get into running tests on your real devices as well, so you can see for yourself, like what are the challenges on real devices versus simulators. And then we also cover like, some advanced level topics, and it depends on like how the class strength is, right? Like say we have 10 to 20 students, then depending on where everyone is, like we can go a little bit deep into like advanced topics like, touch action APIs, or, uh, basic reporting structure, like how would you running your test is fine, but then how do you create a nice HTML report, for example, for your automated runs, right? We also cover parallel testing. So Appium allows you to run like as many tests as you want in parallel, right? So we would cover like what are the challenges, or how to run your, say in real world, you have like 500 tests, and say you can run like 5 tests in parallel, then you can cut down your runtime, right? So those are some of the concepts that we would also cover in the class. And basic idea about this class is to introduce you guys, or introduce everyone to Appium, right? Hopefully create like enough excitement about mobile app automation, right? And everybody is different, right? Depending on your background, depending on how much experience you have in general with automation, programming language, right? Uh, you'll have to put some extra effort depending on what your bar is, right? Or what your background is. But that's the main goal, that hopefully I can help you guys break that ice and say, yep, I know maybe how to write test cases manually. I want to learn how to write automation. Then this is the course for you, right? That I'll definitely make sure that you're comfortable by the end of the course, that you're able to pick up wherever you are in your current role, or you're trying to apply for a new role, right? You'd feel confident that, yes, I can do this. And similarly, if like people who've been doing like web and browser automation through Selenium, maybe also excite them and like make them confident about, writing mobile app automation cases as well, right? So that's the main goal, and basically it's a journey starter, right? Because anything you pick up, you're not gonna cover, you're not gonna learn everything in like a 6-week course, right? So it's like a beginner course, and then I just did one class a few months back, and then this would be my second class. So hopefully, if we find like enough enthusiasm, then we can go for some advanced course, or like take up some projects like down the line, right? So that's basically what I wanted to tell all of you guys, and now I'm open for any questions you guys might have. No questions? I can even turn on your microphone. So if you don't want to type it and just want to speak to me, that's also totally fine. Just let me know your name. Yeah, so that's ES says let's start, right? So yeah, that's basically what I'm trying to do. So a little bit of my background is like everywhere I've worked in the last 6 to 8 years, I've at least hired like 5 to 6 interns, So this is kind of like my passion too, that I've learned something I want to pass on, and think, to me, it's like I'll introduce you to mobile automation, right? And then how you take it, where you take it from there, it depends on you. I can be there with you guys along in the journey as well, right? But it eventually it does depend on you guys, right? Or yourself, like how you take the knowledge and how you apply it. Or I have no idea about the recording. I'll ask Michael. Sure, he'll be able to. They're asking when he'll have the recording. Today. Any questions around have you thought of doing mobile app automation before? Okay, I have a question. Does Appium run similar to WebDriver? Can you run a framework? So let me try to understand your question. Yes, it is very similar to Selenium WebDriver. All your API calls to the server are, they use the same protocols, WebDriver protocols. So there's not a huge learning curve in a sense of like, say, a click method and web versus mobile is the same. Find element method is the same. Not sure about running a framework, but yeah, during the class, I mean, I don't understand that question. Like when you say, can you run a framework? But yeah, during the class, you'll learn how to build a Appium test using PyTest framework, right? And then yeah, we will. You'll also learn like how to do parallel testing. So yeah, you can say you have a bigger suite, like eventually you would know how to run, say, multiple tests in parallel for sure. I'm in start, and there is no ID for Appium. What I was sharing here is the GitHub repo for Appium, right? And there's documentations about how to install, and then you can get started. So there's like a pre-setup that's required. They don't have really IDE. There's another product called, like I was saying, Appium Desktop. But I do not really like to focus on that too much in the class, right? Because that's really the old school way of record and play, but they have even taken out that functionality from this tool. So it's really not very helpful. And it's a good way to get started, maybe see how things work, but because graphics or visuals help, right? But eventually, with the class, you won't be using that tool, hopefully, ever. So yeah, you can go to your Appium downloads and then homepage, and you can download this. When you say Appium download, right? Depending on Mac, Windows, this is Michael's machine. I don't know if I should install, but then you can download either of these exe for Windows, or if you have a Mac, you can download the DMG, and then it's easy to follow. This GitHub repo, you'll see like some getting started doc as well. So if you want to try it out on your own, you can see, you can play around. This is the Appium GitHub repo is the main repo that you need access to, and then you can find hopefully enough documentation to at least play around with the tool if you want to. No, so Appium by itself, it's just a tool, right? So for continuous integration area, you would use your regular tools, maybe Jenkins or whatever you're familiar with, and then you would just use Jenkins to run Appium automation or the automated tests written using Appium. So yeah, you would do whatever setup you did locally on that particular Jenkins machine, for example, right, wherever Jenkins is running. And then you can do multiple different ways. There's few available plugins for Jenkins that I know of, but even simple, like you can write some basic shell script or bash scripts in Jenkins and then just create a job out of it. Can we add mobile automation project in the resume after class? Yeah, so I mean, last class, what we did was we created a GitHub repo for everybody in that class, right? And then everybody has access to that repository, and all the code examples are there. So, sure, yeah, you can mention that you worked on, you've taken the course, and then reference some of the test applications that we use in the class to just say that that's what you used for learning, right? But there is not really, you can show like work experience kind of thing, right? So I had a couple of requests from a few students from my last class as well. So maybe that's something we can work out after the class, right? Like whosoever is interested, maybe we'll figure out something that where we take up like an external project or something, small project where you guys, if we have enough people interested, then we can take up an extra project and you guys can work on it. And then you can probably add some professional experience, in my perspective, right? But until then, what you can do is like what you know is what you write, right? That I practiced this or wrote this. This is what I learned in the course, or you can definitely put that in your resume, right? And then when you use the language that the other interviewer is looking for, then you would make sense that yeah, okay, the person who's writing this knows what he's talking about, right? Is it major requirement to know mobile automation if you're applying for simple web automation? I don't think so, David, that it's required. But what you can also do with web is like you can run nowadays, like you definitely want to test like a mobile website as well, right? So that's where Appium would come into the picture again, you know. So if you have some basic understanding about Appium, that will definitely help. Do you like Swift? Was it a challenge to use? So we don't use Swift, Ilya, and because the course is about is in Python, right? So the beauty about Appium is that you can write tests in any language of your choice, right? So you can write tests in Ruby, Python, JavaScript, Java, any language of your choice, right? So that way you're not bound to one particular platform, right? Say somebody as a QA automation engineer, I learned Swift, right? Then I'm stuck with that domain that I can do iOS automation, right? Like you can't use Swift to do Android, or you're probably that org is not going to be doing that, right? So they'll have like specific, that becomes like a specific role, right? But interesting thing or like the key value about Appium is you can write your test in any language, right? Because once you understand the fundamentals, once you understand how it all comes together, you can write your test in any language. And the other part is like you can write one test that works on both Android and iOS, for example, right? So okay. Any other questions? Yeah, if you take the course, right, like you'll see that language is just a way of like it's more about the framework, right? Say if you pick Swift as a language, then you have to pick a automation framework or testing framework that comes with Swift, for example, right? So Python has few choices. Similarly, Ruby would have few choices of like what framework to use in that language, right? So that is something that you would learn, but that is still a little bit outside of Appium, right? Because Appium it's just basically a tool, right? You can use the tool with any of your existing frameworks, any of the existing languages, right? Okay, any other questions? So classes are usually 2 hours. Like I said in the beginning, the classes are usually 2 days on the weekday and 1 day on Saturday. So Tuesday, Thursday in the evenings, usually 6 to 8, and then Saturday is like 2 to 4. Uh, so the question is, am I to understand we install Appium in our IDE, export Android Studio, and then create contests? No, so it's a little bit different than that. So Appium is basically installed on a machine. So you install Appium on your machine, right? And then from your IDE, any IDE like not Xcode Android Studio, the course is in Python. So the IDE that we would use is PyCharm, right? So in PyCharm, we would write our automation code, and that as part of that automation code, what we'll do is like it will talk to an existing running Appium server. So Appium is like a web server, that's running local on your machine, right? So our automation code will then talk to that web server, and then that web server talks to whatever the end client is. That could be a simulator or it could be the real device. So I've also seen like you could start since it's just a web server, you could also start the web server from within your test code. I've seen people doing that as well. Yeah, so if you prefer Java, then you can use either IntelliJ Eclipse, and then you can write your test in TestNG or any framework that you like. And that test is basically as part of the initialization. Like what you do is like you're gonna establish a session with the Appium server that's running locally. And from then on, it's just you writing your regular test, like whatever you want to do. Launch the app, click on some button, find some element text, whatever it is, whatever your test case is. But Appium by itself, it's like a web server that you would have installed and it would be running before you write your test or before you start your test. Yes, it is. It is similar to Selenium WebDriver. It's the same. That was the other thing when Appium came out. It was a trend. Like a lot of people were trying to come up with some mobile app automation tools, right? So Appium now is kind of like one of the top most used tool, and the reason was that they kept this alignment, that they kept the same standards as the Selenium WebDriver W3C standards, right? So people have easier understanding, people have easy transformation. For people like me, like I was also doing web, right? And for me to pick up Appium was not too hard. The challenge was it was very new tool. It was like open source, right, at that time. So that was more of a bigger challenge. It was not backed with a lot of money from some bigger company, right? So those were some of the initial challenges where, you could be stuck with some bug, and, as a QA automation engineer, you would find workarounds for it, because it's an open source tool. There's no guarantee that it's going to be a bug free product. Right? It has matured a lot in recent years, I would say. Is it possible to use Appium with AWS and other device farms? Yes. Nowadays, there are like almost every, cloud automation provider supports Appium. So AWS was providing, I think, Java and what was it? I think they had Java, JavaScript initially, and then I had actually reached out to them, and they started supporting Ruby as well from last year, and Python for sure they were also supporting. So yes, AWS device farm, they do support all Appium in all client libraries basically. And then there are other cloud providers too, like Appium itself has like Sauce Labs as one of their cloud providers, where you can easily integrate with Sauce Labs, and then they provide you all these devices, sort of device farm where you can run your testing as well. Okay. Any more questions? Cool. So hopefully I, was able to give you guys some introduction about the class, what we will cover, what you will learn, right? And yeah, I would say I think we'll start the class pretty soon, so look out for that. Do join the class, see how you feel. Within like first few days, you'll get a hang of it, right? And you can decide for yourself. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone.